I'd like to talk to you this morning about something that I care a lot about. It's from the heart. It's very personal to me, and I've never talked about it in 23 years on this bima. It is about BDS, the move to boycott, divest, and sanction Israel. How are we supposed to think about a movement that would single out Israel from among all the nations in the world? Not China, that imprisons its own Muslim minority, not Turkey, that stifles and imprisons dissenters, not any of the number of nations where being gay is not only a crime, it is a capital offense. But no, only Israel for special opprobrium. How do we understand a move that does not raise a peep, that does not say boo about all the nations that violate human rights and saves 100% of its energy, 100% of its anger, 100% of its righteous indignation only on the Jewish state? Is there some agenda going on? To understand BDS, it's helpful to summon the hot new book that just came out this year about the very complicated reality of Israel today. This book came out to rave reviews, only rave reviews. It was written by a man named Colum McCann, Colum, C-O-L-U-M, McCann, capital M, small c, capital C-A-N-N. And it tells the story of two fathers who come together after suffering unimaginable loss. One father is an Israeli Jew named Rami Elchanan, whose 14-year-old daughter, Smadar Elchanan, was blown to pieces by 3 Palestinian terrorists while walking one day on Ben Yehuda Street. And the other father is a Palestinian Muslim named Bassam Aramin, whose 10-year-old daughter, Abir Aramin, was shot and killed by an 18-year-old Israeli soldier. These two fathers, having faced unimaginable loss, come together and form an organization called Combatants for Peace. They become friends, and then they become like brothers. And this book by Colum McCann and this deep, deep relationship between these two fathers, Bassam Aramin and Rami Elchanan, serve as a helpful corrective to the central premise of BDS. The central premise of BDS is that this is the story of Israel. Israel is about white people, white Jews, oppressing people of color, Palestinians. It's about white people who are colonizers, Jews, taking the land of an indigenous people of color, the Palestinians. And this maps onto their black-white template very well. It's the same template they use for South Africa, white people who are oppressing black people. It's the same template they use for America, white people oppressing black people. And it's the same template they use for Israel, white people oppressing people of color, except that in the case of Israel, it's not only inaccurate, it is malevolently and flagrantly inaccurate, and this book makes it so clear. The story of modern Israel in this book is not of one people that is oppressing another. To the contrary, it's much messier and more complicated than that. It's the story of two peoples struggling for one small land. Two peoples who both have long-standing and deeply felt and conflicting claims to that land. And what BDS does not see and cannot acknowledge are the many serious attempts that Israel has tried to make peace with the other people, that Israel has tried to make peace with the Palestinians. And that's so important because that is indeed the backdrop of this book by Colin McCann. So when does Smadar Elchanan get blown to pieces at the age of 14 while walking down Ben Yehuda Street by 3 Palestinian terrorists? Answer, that happens after Israel had tried to come to a two-state solution with the Palestinians. This was under the government of Prime Minister Ehud Barak. And Israel tried to offer the Palestinians 96% of the land that they sought, including dividing sovereignty of Jerusalem itself. And eastern Jerusalem was going to become the capital of the new state of Palestine. And that was the official position of the state of Israel under Prime Minister Ehud Barak. And Palestinians not only said no, they responded with the Second Intifada, which claimed the lives of 1,000 innocent Israelis, among them Smadar Elchanan. Now, BDS cannot see that, will not see that, refuses to see that. BDS does not see that Israel tried to make peace and does not see Palestinian rejectionism and Palestinian terrorism. Which brings us to the very evocative title of Colin McCann's book. When I first heard about the book and I first saw the title, it's a word that I had literally never heard before. I had to look up this word in the dictionary. The title of the book is A Paragon, which is spelled A-P-E-I-R-O-G-O-N. A-P-E-I-R-O-G-O-N. And a paragon is a geometric form that has an infinity of sides. An infinity of sides, an infinity of aspects to try to capture the infinite complexity of Israel, the infinite complexity of two peoples trying to struggle in one land. In fact, this is just so evocative about the book. The book has 1,001 chapters. Have you ever read a book with 1,001 chapters? But Colin McCann writes a book with 1,001 chapters because it takes at least that many chapters to begin to try to capture the complexity of Israel. Now, by contrast, BDS does not have 1,001 chapters. BDS has one idea, not 1,001. BDS has one idea, and it is malevolent and maliciously false. Here's the one idea. This is it, BDS. Israel equals South Africa. Israel equals apartheid. Israel equals immoral. Israel equals white Jews oppressing Palestinians, people of color. And by trying to equate Israel with South Africa, by having one idea, not 1,001 chapters, BDS belies its agenda. And its agenda is to deny the legitimacy to Israel at all. There's no legitimacy to the state of Israel. After all, when the Palestinians responded to Ehud Barak's offer of 96% of their land with a capital in eastern Jerusalem, and the reason they said no, and the reason they responded by killing Smadar Elchanan and another 999 Israelis, was because their objection is not to 1967. Their objection is to 1948. The sin is not 1967. The sin is 1948. And the remedy to that sin is therefore not some territories in the West Bank and Gaza. The remedy is all of Israel. All of Israel is invalid. All of Israel has no right to exist. That's what BDS is all about. And that has disastrous consequences. Here's the thing about hatred. Why is it that BDS ignores everyone else and focuses on the Jewish state? Because it is hatred against Jews and the Jewish state. And here's the deal with hatred. When it spreads, it has all kinds of consequences that are unexpected and unanticipated. Among them, the people that BDS hurts the most are the Palestinians it's trying to help. Consider the case of SodaStream. We all know about SodaStream. It's that really cool company where you can make seltzer at home. It's an Israeli company. It had a factory in the West Bank. And then BDS decided, let's boycott SodaStream. Not China, not Turkey, not Iran, SodaStream. So SodaStream, in response to BDS, moved its factory out of the West Bank to the Negev. And SodaStream had hired hundreds of Palestinians from the West Bank who had really good jobs. And now all those jobs were taken away from the Palestinians, and Bedouins were able to do that job in the Negev. So one day, National Public Radio decided to figure out, NPR did a segment on, if you're a Palestinian in the West Bank and you used to work at SodaStream, but now you don't because they moved the factory because of BDS. How's that working out for the Palestinians? And the answer is, it was terrible for the Palestinians. They interviewed this guy named Allah al-Kabani, who's in his 20s. And Allah al-Kabani said, I loved my job at SodaStream. It was good work, and it paid really, really well. When I was at SodaStream, I had money. I had spending money. I had money in my pocket. I was able to buy new clothes. I was able to go out on dates. And he's single. He's looking to get married. He's in his 20s. I was able to date because I had a secure source of income. When the factory closed and they moved it to the Negev, I couldn't find another job. Other Palestinians couldn't find another job. In the end, I was able to find a cart where I would hawk produce. On a good day, I make 1/4 of what I used to earn. And NPR said, well, how's that working out for you? What's the effect on you? And he said, I can no longer go out. I don't have spending money. And mostly I can't date. I can't try to find a bride. Because I can only try to find a bride if I have a secure source of income, which I no longer do, thanks to BDS. But BDS doesn't only hate on Israeli Jews. BDS doesn't only hurt Palestinians. BDS is a very local issue. And this is just so important. Don't miss this. BDS does not only boycott Israel. BDS boycotts those who support Israel. BDS doesn't only boycott Israel. BDS boycotts us when we support Israel. Consider what happened to the New York Times op-ed writer Bari Weiss, who recently tendered her letter of resignation, in which she explained that she was bullied by BDS supporters because of her pro-Israel views. These are Bari Weiss's words. She said that she was, and I quote, the subject of constant bullying by colleagues who disagree with my views. They've called me a Nazi and a racist. I have learned to brush off comments about how I'm writing about the Jews again. Several colleagues, perceived to be friendly with me, were badgered by coworkers. my work and my character are openly demeaned. There are some coworkers insist that I need to be rooted out if this company is to be a truly inclusive one, while others post axe emojis next to my name. Still other New York Times employees publicly smear me as a liar and a bigot on Twitter with no fear that harassing me will be met with appropriate action, and they never are. This kind of intimidation is our issue. It chills free speech, and it's going to chill the free speech of our children and grandchildren. When your kids and your grandkids go off to college and they want to share their pro-Israel feelings, they will be disincented to do so when the BDS blogosphere responds by calling them racists and Nazis. And they will be bullied into silence. And you know this. You know this. How we talk affects how we feel, affects how we act. And if we can't talk about our love and support of Israel because we're going to be bullied, then we stop thinking about our love and support of Israel, and that in time will change how we feel about Israel. Do we want a world in which we are bullied and intimidated because of our support of Israel, the way that Barry Weiss was demonstrably bullied and intimidated? That is what's going to happen if BDS goes mainstream. If BDS goes mainstream, it will become mainstream to say Israel is South Africa. Mainstream to say that Israel is apartheid. Mainstream to say that Israel is immoral. Mainstream to say that Israel is illegitimate and should not exist at all. Israel will be boycotted. Those who support Israel will be boycotted. If our children and grandchildren have the moral courage anyway to support Israel on campus, they will be boycotted. And Israelis and Palestinians will be harmed if BDS goes mainstream. Sadly, BDS is growing in our country. It's growing. There are already several representatives in Congress who are proud and defiant BDS supporters. And an alarm was sounded this week because a BDS supporter won the Democratic primary in St. Louis. And this is a district that faithfully and reliably sends Democrats to Congress. So the number of BDS supporters in Congress is going to go up by one. Hatred spreads. Hatred becomes normalized. Don't let that happen here. Do not let that happen here. This issue is very much our issue. This work is very much our work, and it is on us. It is our work right now. Shabbat shalom.